We scaled from 100K to 50K in monthly revenue in about 4 or 5 months. I create custom proposals and sales decks with Claude code design for every single prospect. And I couldn't do that before. You'd be surprised how much business you can generate if you crack one channel.
So Fernando, a few years ago, you ran a personal brand agency and you worked with all these public CEOs. Some of these CEOs even did over $1 billion in revenue. You walked away. 3 years later, you scaled this go-to-market agency to 3 million revenue. So tell me, like, what happened?
First thing actually is the personal brand agency actually, let's call it, evolved into more of a go-to-market agency. And so what we realized was that with that personal branding, the ultimate goal was the revenue and pipeline for our founders, as well as the visibility. So it was that kind of evolution. So it just does still run, but it used to be called Thought Leader. Now it's called RevenueFlow. That was a big transformation on our side. In terms of the shift in the team as well, there's actually something interesting. We originally had, I think we scaled pretty quickly, I think from about 100K to about 350K in monthly revenue. And with that, in about 4 or 5 months, by the way. And with that came a lot of kind of hiring challenges, if you will. And for us, it became very, very overwhelming to manage 50 people, as you can imagine, right? In that short space of time. And bear in mind, we were first-time founders with a lot of kind of really high quality clients that we wanted to perform well on. And to train someone up in the short space of time, that is a very, very difficult thing to do. And so that part, even though it sounded pretty sexy on paper, I think that part was extremely challenging, but we learned a lot in terms of the types of clients we want to serve, in terms of the results that we can deliver, in terms of how to hire and who to hire, as well as, again, to your point, and kind of the whole premise of what you do is the systems to build so that they don't break when you scale that fast.
Yeah, and so you went from 100K to 450K a
350.
350K. So you tripled the business, and you decided not to triple the headcount. Basically, you said it's way too. I mean, I can't imagine hiring so quickly. What made you make that decision?
So the idea initially was, this was actually before AI agents were, and this was probably 2025. And AI agents weren't that prominent. It was very much still fairly basic. It was just kind of chat, and it was very much, there wasn't execution layers on top of that. And so the way we thought about how we scale is, okay, if we want to scale revenue, scale headcount, right? And scale headcount, then you can actually figure out that pod structure and what that looks like. As we grew, as time went on, AI started accelerating at a rate faster than we were building. And what that allowed us to do was it unlocked new opportunities and new structures for us to scale our business. And so over time, I think part of the whole 2025 period was a very transitionary. So it was a lot of time figuring out, okay, who we can serve and who we can't serve, and actually building longer term relationships with the key clients that we have. But then also understanding, okay, what can AI do now and what can't AI do now? And to how can we, instead of, let's call it, relying on big pod teams, how can we augment a leaner team to actually massively increase output as well as quality, which also meant that we could streamline, let's call it, workflows, so we don't have 10 different communications lines. There was a period of time, by the way, that we had probably, I think, one, let's call it a head of service delivery, or someone who was managing a portfolio of clients who were managing like 4 or 5 people in their team. And that meant that we had to basically share ideas or strategies with one person, who then had to disseminate that information to 4 people and manage them at the same time. But then they also had to manage each other. And so it created 10 different lines of communication, which meant it was very difficult for everyone involved, by the way. And we realized that as a kind of management team and leadership team. And I think as AI has developed, that's allowed us to really streamline a lot of it so that we can focus on what we do best, which is actually the strategic element of what to do before, and any execution now can take care of itself.
That transition must have been painful. Like, what'd you have to do?
Yeah, it was tough. I think for us, it was very much, I think it was seeing who was aligned to the business, and seeing what the business needed at the time, and actually figuring out, okay, what is a new structure and who we would need to align to this new structure. And that obviously meant that we had to part ways with some of the team, but also understanding that it was for the best for the long-term business, because to scale at the rate that we wanted to, or to build the business the way we wanted to, it would have been very, very difficult with big teams to actually get to, let's call it, get to the goal that we wanted to, which is essentially to be able to deliver the best results for our clients without having to, with the ability for us to take the ideas in our head and turn them into results without going through a lot of different kind of management communication lines.
Yeah, I mean, like, so it sounds like to triple, essentially, you guys had to do two things. One was the go-to-market positioning narrow down, which we'll talk about in a sec because that's your expertise. And the other is the structure side. And the structure side, I mean, we just went through a transformation ourselves, and it was super painful because, like, we didn't realize all the things we had to do. We're like, okay, what's this database thing? Like, we have to collect data that agents on top operate on top of, right? Like, okay, data means you have to connect these pipes, and like, how do we get data flowing into the thing so agents can operate on top of, right? And so to create that whole ecosystem and then have your people trained to how to use that ecosystem, like that whole thing must have taken months.
Yeah. So there's this thing called I think intelligence system. Carpathy as well as Jack Dorsey kind of shared this idea where there's what we call like a centralized intelligence unit where you can connect all of your different tools and then retrieve information off the back of that. And so what that then allows you to do is store centralized information that can be easily accessible at any time across the entire business, across all of your tools. Right now, the next step on top of that is new markdown files or new kind of instruction manuals on decisions you make based on the information that you retrieve, right? And all of that is saved as memory. And so the next layer to that is then what do you do with that, right? And that is where it gets crazy. So you can start creating marketing assets just like that. You can create sales assets just like that.
Crazy.
You can run campaigns just like that. You can start to serve clients with way higher precision. Again, the time taken to do it is still can still be quite long, but the likelihood of success is actually way higher than it used to be because now you have the learnings from the entire portfolio of clients.
Yeah. And a lot of it happens while you sleep because they're just running the jobs in the background. Okay, so at this point you've got this database with all the information you need, agents running on top of it, and you're like, hey, we got folks who are operating on top of this centralized brain, let's call it. Part two of that equation was working on your positioning, right? Saying like, hey, we've got all these clients. We don't serve 80% of them. Let's focus on the 20 that make us money, right? What was that exercise like?
I think it was really looking at who, with our systems, we could get the best results. And by the way, we didn't actually know for sure until we actually tested it out and worked with clients on a long period and actually dedicated more time and effort to actually figure that out. But the ones that we were able to generate results for, we then try and figure out, okay, what are the common patterns here and how can we kind of retarget that type of industry? And so it was a long exercise, and we're actually still doing that right now to really dial this in. To actually figure out, okay, who do we get the best results for? Who do we have the best relationships with? Who are the easiest to work with? For us, where's the expansion opportunity to understand, okay, with each client that we work with, how can we continue building relationships so we can build the scope of what we do, but then with that scope adds incremental value to them. So there's a lot more strategic thinking about who we take on rather than just taking on anyone anymore. And I think that exercise has been very, very iterative, and we're still doing it. But with that, it allows us to serve each client with a higher precision of, let's call it, results and the quality of the results that we can achieve.
And is that part of the, because you guys run a go-to-market agency, is that part of the go-to-market process for you guys? Like, what does the end-to-end process look like for go-to-market?
That's a good question. So go-to-market, I think it's important to kind of take a step back to understand what it actually is, because I think we were discussing just before this, is it more marketing or is it more sales? I think in this kind of AI age, it's a combination of both, right? Marketing and sales are kind of blurring into one function, and we call that on our side go to market. The simple definition is, how do we find our target customers and kind of connect with them so that they become clients. Now they're very broad terms, right? And so if I wanted to break it down to more tactical specific things, it's very much who are we targeting? So really having a clear idea on what that is, and that's just defined by who are your best customers, who stays the longest, which target market are you specifically honing into. And once we have that, then we actually build those lists. Again, we have what's known as signals these days, where you can identify buyer's intent, right? Which is incredibly important because we no longer live in the days where you just scrape, let's call it Apollo static lists or LinkedIn sales nav lists. Again, they're still useful, but they're not inclusive of every type of customer that we want to target. When you look at signals, which is any buyer's intent, such as a company raising capital or someone hiring for a position, or even social signals, right? So someone who likes, comments on your piece of content, as well as looks at your profile, things like that. You can then understand, okay, this person or this prospect is more likely to respond to your outbound message, whether it's warm or cold. And that's when you can start to actually really generate more predictable lead flow and deal flow.
Interesting. We're going through that process now, so I'm ecstatic to nerd out on this. And so let's go through the process from the beginning, right? So if someone's like, hey, I've never thought about my go-to-market, let's say they were an agency, just to make an example, let's say it's an email marketing agency, right? I imagine right now, I have an email marketing agency. My clients are anyone with a Pulse and a credit card, right? What do I do first?
To
and why,
find more clients?
Well, let's start. Why should I care about go-to-market?
I mean, it's like so why do you need to cook? You need to survive, right? So go to market essentially, if you cannot generate deal flow for your company, then your business will die, right? Okay, if you have high churn rate, more deal flow will compensate for that. If you have any, it's basically like it's the lifeblood of the entire business to grow, right? You can have amazing retention, you can have amazing upsells, and by all means, I've met a lot of prospects and clients and founders in my network who have done that. But the point is what happens if they churn? What happens if something happens? What happens if, even if you get good results, they still churn, right? And so being able to have a healthy stream of conversations and active conversations that you're having is incredibly important for whatever business or business model, whether it's B2C, B2B, anything like that. That's what I mean.
And how do for you and I went in on this email marketing agency together, right? And so how do I know if I have a go-to-market problem, right? Because like I imagine go-to-market, there's the deal flow part, which is just how many sales calls and conversions, right, do I have in my calendar? But then I also imagine is that the right person? Is that the person who has the highest LTV, right? Am I targeting them on the right channels? Like all those kind of questions. What part of that is included in go-to-market in terms of like offer, in terms of how much money I make per customer, that kind of stuff? And how do I know if I have a problem with it?
So I'll answer that one first. You have a problem if your business isn't growing and your business is dying, right? Hormozi has a good thing about how you diagnose a business, is understanding what is the biggest constraint. So for example, if you're getting enough conversations in every single week, then obviously go-to-market is not a problem. If you have a lot of conversations, but none of them are converting, then again, that is not a go-to-market problem either. If you have good conversations and you convert, but once they come in, they leave straight away, then again, that's not a go-to-market problem either. And so the constraints are different at different phases. So just understanding at each moment in time, what are the biggest constraints in the business?
Right.
And so, for example, if you're not having enough conversations, that's a very easy indicator of a go-to-market problem. Now, how would you? So what was your first question? It was, what would they do?
Well, I think so. First, it's a two-parter, which is like, how do I know I have a problem? Which I heard you say like you don't have enough calls in your calendar, conversion to pipe, etc. And so maybe a clarifying question is, okay, so I have these other terms, right? I've got lead generation, I've got positioning, I've got sales process, I've got RevOps, right? All these components to it. How do those differ from go-to-market, or is go-to-market the umbrella category that encompasses all of the whole process? Like where does go-to-market start and end?
Yeah. So that's a great question. The way I think about it is go-to-market is anything before a prospect becomes a customer. It's anything you do, right? Whether it's the first content piece you post, whether it's, I don't know, the 10th follow-up you do with them, right? These are things that ensure that you understand and have full visibility on where each prospect or person you're speaking with is in that process to becoming customer, right?
Got it.
And that's go-to-market. And so once they become a customer, then it's about how you expand those accounts. And so you need RevOps as a function to be able to understand, okay, which clients do we need to touch base with? Which clients do we need to have more conversations, check-in, retention conversations? And that's, again, RevOps transcends just to go-to-market, but it's a core function to connect both new business and existing business.
Got it. Okay. And so then it would be, I would imagine there's positioning strategy, like who do I target, all that kind of stuff. Who do I target? What solution do I give them, and how much do I charge in a way I make good money, right? The money model. I imagine that's all part of the positioning strategy part. Then there's the lead gen part. Then there's the RevOps, or like the tech part that gets them on the phone and all that kind of stuff. And then some component of nurture, I imagine. Is that the end-to-end flow? Am I missing anything? Like how do you guys think about it?
Well, it's very much dependent on every single business, right? So it's understanding what your current sales process is right now, from first touch to conversion, because it's very different. For example, a high ticket boutique M&A consultancy is going to have a different sales process to a B2B SaaS, for example, right? And so a high ticket M&A consultancy might have meet someone at a conference, and then they might take them out for dinner, and then they might have conversations about potential deal flow that might come in, but that the timing may be off. So then you need to figure out, okay, when do they need a deal? When are they looking to acquire another company or whatever it is? And so you actually have to be a lot more, let's call it, tailored to the type of person you're working with, the type of client you're working with. Whereas a B2B SaaS, again, they probably have proven sales processes already with a team of SDRs. And so what they can essentially do is just scale without necessarily having these kind of supply constraints. And so it could be a lot more fast paced, a lot more kind of more so transactional, where you could just have, okay, first touch point, maybe a demo, maybe a couple more calls to like flesh out the scope of works, and then boom, it could become a client off the back of that. And so there's different sales motions. And that's how we think about it. We have to understand what they do, how they do it, and what has worked for them in the past. So we don't want to create new things from scratch here.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so I know I have a go-to-market problem if my revenue is just flatlined, right? Or
Largely,
not growing at the rate that I want to.
So this is about the founder understanding the constraints, right? It's actually it's not as easy as how we say it is, because a revenue flatlining could be for many reasons. It could be for not getting enough leads, not converting them enough, or high churn, right? Or no expansion. There's a lot of different things that lead to flatlining revenue. And so being able to diagnose that's actually quite important as any kind of business owner, I believe. Because once you have that diagnosis, then you can apply, let's call it, judgment as well as resources to unlocking that constraint. And then you move on to the next constraint, and then the next constraint, and the next constraint.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. So our email marketing agency, let's call it, actually my middle name is actually Fernando. So let's call it Brian Fernando's email marketing agency. Okay, so our email marketing agency is just flatlined. What do? How do we diagnose whether it's a go-to-market problem or if it's a churn problem, etc.?
Okay, I mean, that's very simple. Okay, how many leads are you getting every single week? How many conversations are you getting? How many of those conversations are converting into deals? Right, understanding that, and then also understanding what is your retention rate? What is it? And then comparing all of that to industry benchmarks, right? That's a simple way of doing it. Or you could be like, okay, is this actually what I want. Are these metrics still the metrics I want to hit? For example, if you've got like a 5% close rate, okay, there may be a positioning issue, there might be an offer issue, there may be a sales technique issue, or it could be a qualification issue where it's like, hey,
Yeah.
half the people you get aren't really that qualified. So you can start to dive deeper, but as long as you can pinpoint high level which part of it is, then you can actually start to dive deeper into that.
I imagine like, okay, so you just listed a ton of metrics. I imagine a lot of people you talk to don't have those metrics ready for you, right? Like at what point does it start to make sense to, like, when do you collect all these in terms of like, how do I phrase this? Like how many of the folks you talk to have all these metrics ready for you?
Well, very transparently, not many. All right. And so
Yeah.
the idea is that, and this is actually an exercise that we've struggled with as well, because it's very much a question of like how important is data at which stage. I think when you're in a kind of search mode where you're figuring out who your ICP is, when you're figuring out when you're trying to sell a new product, whatever it is, then I don't personally believe that data matters that much. I think it's more important. What's more important is just the signals you get just from the conversations you have, from just like small sample sizes. Because if you look at it, let's say for example, you get to take 200 calls, and you have like an 8% conversion rate off the back of that. Well, you might have done like 3 different pivots on the offers, and no one really knows the data, like the context within that. So that's where it gets a bit kind of messy. I think the best thing you can do is actually take sample sizes and actually do more, let's call it back of napkin type calculations to get a general hypothesis of which direction to go. Again, you may not be correct, hence why there's an iterative, let's call it iterative approach to it.
Yeah. Okay. And so okay, so for our email marketing agency we just invented, right? Our data's a mess, right? That's probably pretty standard for most folks. And so if you say, how many leads am I getting a week, right? I imagine you think about it and you're like, okay, I know roughly, right? But like is that rough estimate enough to help me figure out that I have a go-to-market problem and what to do with it?
I mean, yeah, you can do some quick back of napkin. Let's say you get 10 leads a week, right? And let's say, I don't know, 5 of them become sales conversations. And then let's say, for example, you close 1 of them. Again, that's a small sample size of what you could potentially do. And again, you could forecast that out, forecast it down, whatever it is. Now, then it becomes, how do you scale what you currently have? How do you scale that? That is enough data to really make an iterative approach. I'm just talking for SMBs, right? When you're a big enterprise or mid-market, you will have a lot of this data. Again, it may not be clean, it may not be 100% accurate, but you already have a lot of this data. We like to start very simple, right? We don't need to invest in any kind of expensive enterprise tools for the CRM. Just have a Google spreadsheet. Just track. Okay, have these many calls, have this, da, 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 da. You can start to spot patterns there. And then when you get a little bit more advanced, you can then start to use, let's call it Claude Code or Codex, to start analyzing a lot of this data and actually using its judgment to support you in your thinking as well.
Yeah. Okay. And so say you do 4 sales calls a week, I'm making it up, 20% conversion rate, 30% conversion rate, roughly. Okay, so now what? So we know roughly, we figure out how do we figure out the constraint? Do you typically do benchmark to other peers, or do you say, hey, no one cares about the average, we want to be better than the average? Is there a kind of mental model I can use to figure out where the constraint is? Like how do you kind of typically do it?
I think a simple razor, which is just, will the business grow or not? If I just leave this, let us go. If I just don't focus on this, does it grow? And if not, then that's the constraint, right? I think for us, we have a saying internally, just don't midwit it, which is, that bell curve where it's like the middle is midwit and then the other side is just like simple actions. That's how we think about it. And so from a constraint perspective, it's just like, well, if I just do nothing for the rest of the month or year or whatever, what would break first? Like, will this business grow? And if not, what can I do to make this business grow as fast as possible?
That's interesting, because I would have thought the opposite model, which is like, if I 100x or if I 10x the volume, where's it break? But now that I think about it out loud, that model works really well on finding your delivery constraint, but not your go-to-market constraint. And so that sounds like a better mental model, which is like, okay, in the go-to-market constraint, if I did nothing, no activities, would that highlight the constraint? Is that the right way of thinking of it?
If you yourself didn't, if you yourself did nothing and a business just ticked along with the systems it has now, would it grow? That's when you know that's when you can start to diagnose this. Because if for example the business starts dying, then it's like, okay, well there's some constraint there, and then it's about pinpointing what that is.
Yeah, I got it. Can you think of any, do we have any tools to kind of help pinpoint, like, is it leads? Is it conversion problem? Is it whatever, nurture
Yeah.
problem, etc.?
I think it's just like a simple. I think in any agency services business, there's just a high level statistic, high level KPIs. I don't think we need to overcomplicate this too much. It's just like, okay, how many conversations are you having? We call it book calls a week, let's call it, or a month. How many of them then are qualified and become clients? Very simple. Then have a simple calculation, and then once they stay, how long do they stay on average? And that's pretty much it. And so that's like a
Okay.
very simple framework to then just figure out, okay, if it's like 3 months, then you probably know you have a retention problem. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, 3 months is not a long time, right?
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
ideally, if you want to, I know there's a bunch of these new businesses and new agencies or whatever, where people are just running it up very quickly. It's like young guys starting it up. But I think if you look at the older generation have been running agencies for like 20 plus years. I spoke to a founder yesterday, been running a marketing agency for like 19 years. His longest retaining client is surprisingly 19 years, right? And so his
No.
average retention is like 5+ years. I think that's pretty
Yeah.
cool because it means that, again, if 3 months is like your average, then you don't need to compare it to anything. You just know that it's not long enough, full stop, right? I think
Yeah.
a lot of the times we need to think more in long term as opposed to short term. How can we just get them through the door? It's actually how do we get them through the door, but then also like keep them forever. That's a saying that we have internally as well. It's like when someone comes in, it's like, what do we need to do on our side to keep them forever? Because we're not trying to retain clients for like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or even 6 months. There's no point of
Yeah.
that because we put in a lot of effort to acquire a new client, put in a lot of kind of upfront effort there. And so for us to then just churn them straight away, it makes no sense. And also reputational damage on the agency and the business that we're in as well. So there's a lot of things, again, bit of a tangent, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. Like, okay, it sounds like a lot of go-to-market myths, let's call it. Um, what are some that you hear all the time,
Go to market
or like
myths.
lesser known kind of
Yeah.
like,
So this is one that
yeah,
we were saying before this conversation, which was a lot of, let's call it, non-technical, let's call it founders, owners, business leaders, typically think that when they hear the word automation or AI, it feels very spammy and AI slop. Because again, transparently, there is a lot of AI
yeah,
slop, and it's very spammy. It is, right? Because if you look in your cold email inbox now, you probably see a bunch of emails. Like the number of emails that have been sent out is probably multiples of what it used to be, which just means that you have to do better. That's simply it. It's not that it's not a good channel. It's not that it's a bunch of AI slop or whatever it is. It's you just have to do better. And the tools we have in our arsenal not only create more AI slop, but it also creates more hyper personalization than we could ever have achieved in the past. And so the way I think about it is, what is it that you typically do that builds a relationship, that you do manually, the research, the time and effort you spend on a message before you send it out? We can now do that scale, right? Instead of thinking about it as, oh, you're just sending a generic message that is just super salesy, you can actually now create more, let's call it, you can create more niche variables that allow your message to sound incredibly personalized. We have a campaign now that's very, very specific based on the data that we scrape on every single company on our list. And it just sounds like we've got recommendations or we know the answer to their exact pain point because we're just able to scrape the data very, very cleanly. And I asked them on conversation and they say, oh, something about your message. I get these all the time, but something about your message made us want to book this meeting. And the reason for that, and I tell them it's AI, and they're like, I know it's AI, but it was just something compelling about the message. And the reason for that is just, it feels like the research that you do is very, very tailored to them. So there are timeless principles, and you just have to apply it to the tech that we have to scale the approach, right? So it's, even if you have a high relationship-based sales process or a sales motion or a go-to-market motion, you can connect it. You can connect it to AI tools and AI workflows to actually help you go to market a lot quicker. So for example, let's say you have a dinner that you typically host, and you have your team just message your network now and again, whatever. You can then get AI to just see who's around in the area and then just send them a message. So there's so many ways you can cut the cake, and it's just about being creative. It's not about sending a message and just hoping they reply and book a meeting after one email. It's about how can you connect, how can you leverage technology to massively enable an entire company to have more conversations, be in front of more people more times, right? These are the types of things that we can do now. And it doesn't matter what type of process they run, you can originate more opportunities or flag them up or get in front of the right people, and then they can take it from there.
And like, that's so cool. And so what kind of examples, what can we do now that we couldn't do before? And I heard you say at the beginning, you were talking about signals and enriching data, that kind of stuff. Is that some of it?
Yeah. Signals is like a hot trend right now, and I'm sure you've probably seen it on LinkedIn timeline quite a lot. I'm sure your audience has as well. It's this idea that you can now find niche lists and build custom lists of your prospects who've shown buyer's intent. You couldn't do this before, right? So I mean, you have tools such as RB2B, which allow you to de-anonymize website visitors on your website. And so if you look at the website visitors on your case study page, for example, that is a perfect, let's call it a signal that someone is interested, because someone only looks at your case studies if they're interested at your services and what you do and the results you generate, right? So if you can enrich that and see that, have that visibility, then you can send outreach sequences off the back of that. So your question of what can AI do now, or what can we do now with GTM that we couldn't do before, is exactly this: is have way more visibility on way more parts of the marketing and sales cycle and take action on those at scale without having to spend time to manually do these execution tasks, like sending the messages, doing the research, whatever it is. Even sales decks now, like I create custom proposals and sales decks and roadmaps with Claude Code Design for every single prospect. And I couldn't do that before. Like you can imagine how much it improves your ability to convey value and convert the deal if you just show them, hey, look, this is what we heard in the last conversation based on the transcripts that we have, and this is now what we're going to do for you, and it's the exact steps, and this is the commercial structure. It visualizes things way better, visualizes information, and allows us to communicate it in a way that our clients can understand easily. That's the thing, right? There's a lot more. And again, the way I think about this is it's very much limited to your imagination. So whatever it is you have, the ideas, use cases, now you can figure out niche things that you couldn't do before. But this requires expertise of being in the industry long enough to actually know what to even test out, right? So there's a lot of steps here. But it's like the bottom line is just it can do a lot of what you thought you couldn't do in the past.
And so let's talk about, that's a cool, these examples are cool. Let's go into the use case a little bit. So yours was like, imagine this is a sales call and we finish and you're like, hey, that was cool. Send me some stuff, right? I have the sales call recorded and it shoots into a database, whatever. And then there's some kind of task in the background that says, hey, dump this into Claude Design, turn the sales conversation into a proposal. And is that what it looks like, or what?
Yeah, yeah, that's what it looks like.
Way.
Yeah. So again, the process is simple, but the iteration, that's what I put more focus. So what I mean by that is, let's say for example, I'm trying to negotiate a more complex scope of works. What we have is basic pricing. What we have is basic like modular setups or roadmaps of what we do, but you need to now tailor it to the client based on what they want and based on what we can provide. And that is where the judgment is required. So this is what I mean by judgment, leaning heavier into judgment. because the execution is doable. Like your Claude Code Design or whatever tool you decide to use can now create the assets. So you don't have to spend as much time like aligning text boxes or creating visuals. You can spend more time now thinking about what value you're going to deliver and how you will deliver it and how you will present it to the client such that they have the confidence to invest in your service or product or whatever it is you're trying to sell. And so what I think about, how I think about this is abstraction in layers of work. So you start off with an execution layer, which is simply, let's say, sending a message, actually creating the deck or whatever it is, like manually. Then you have the next layer, which is understanding what your typical components of these things are, right? So if it's a deck, it's like typical pricing, typical capabilities, whatever it is. And then the next layer is like customizing it very, very deeply to the person you're speaking with, so that and then finally communicating that to them. And AI can help with all of those final two pieces, but it can't necessarily choose. It doesn't necessarily dictate. It can't necessarily dictate what the best answer is. It can help you think, but it can't help you dictate. Ultimately, you're the person who then decides, okay, this is good, this is not. We run with this, we don't run with this. So the human is always needed at the top end or at the thinking part. And that's why I think judgment, agency, taste, these are components that are extremely valuable, sorry. And that is, I think, where the value is. And that's how we try to position ourselves now. We're very much more founder-led, founder-driven, and actually have like deeper relationships with our clients, because now we can brainstorm more complex go-to-market strategies, more complex signals, understanding where on the internet we can scrape different lists, understanding how we can actually get to the target customer rather than just sending an email. Can we actually leverage this capability to actually connect it to something else they already do? Right. So there's a lot more brainstorming to that again, AI can support with, but it can't necessarily pinpoint the right answer. That is it. We're elevating our ability to deliver results by having more ways to deliver results and faster.
And so are you able now so you're able to create these custom proposals you couldn't do before. What about on the go-to-market side? Like you're saying that you can build these custom lists. There's different outreach ways that you can do and ways you couldn't before. Like what are some use cases? What are some examples?
Yeah. So I'll give you one example of a conversation I had today. There was a founder who had trouble building lists. Again, he has no trouble once he has a list to, let's say, contact the client and book the meeting or convert the deal. Now, what he has trouble with is actually finding more of the specific type of prospect that he is looking for. And the reason why there's a challenge is because the market that he's after, everyone is like, it's like a mom and pop shop, old school, no LinkedIn presence, no online presence, no digital footprint. So what do they have to do? They have to like look into these like niche databases, look at like the geographic location of the facility that they're trying to target, and then look at what the company's called, and then there's so many different steps towards it to actually find the owner and actually even verify if the owner is the right person and all these other things. And so that is a big problem. Right, because if you can't even find your target prospect, how are you able to grow your business? That's again, I'm not saying every business has that problem, but that was just one I just found incredibly interesting. And so the play now is, how do you, instead of trying to go through these like 10 steps to find the one contact and then verify it's true, how can we create processes that do that for us by connecting to MCPs or whatever APIs we have to scrape the web and actually execute on this, to then build a list as the final deliverable that is fully verified and fully factual. That to me is mind-blowing that we can do that in this day and age without having to spend hundreds of manual hours to execute on.
And so in that case, I imagine you scrape whatever, you have a Google Maps scraper or something like that. And then what kind of signals would you look for in that case?
So I'll give you an example. It's hard to see revenue numbers, right, if you're just looking at public data sometimes. So the question that becomes, how do you understand the revenue of your ICP from public data. And so you can use proxies. And so proxies, for example, is headcount. So if you look at the agency space, maybe it's $100,000 per year per employee. And so you can actually approximate based on the headcount on their LinkedIn, how much revenue they can generate. Again, not always accurate, but these are what we call criteria or markers of your ideal customer profile, right? And so the signals are also understanding what actions do your buyers and your customers take to when they are looking for a solution like yours. So an example of this is when a company first raises capital, what do they spend that on? There's only two things they can spend that on, right? Or they would spend it on to 10x the business. One, it's marketing, or go to market. And number two is product, right? To really triple down on product, hire more engineers or whatever it is. And so with that capital raise as a proxy, you can then scrape that list and outbound to all the key decision makers for whatever, go to market services or whatever services based on that intent, right? There's so many other intents you can do as well. And again, this game is like becoming increasingly bigger because every industry, every customer, every offer is completely different. And so that's why it takes a lot of thinking to actually understand how, like, it understands what to do. The how to do it is it's not as hard as it used to be. It's actually a lot easier than it used to be. It's understanding what to do now.
And so we've got now all these new ways to build lists, all these new ways to enrich them, find signals, figure out who's the right person to reach out to on that list. Now let's talk about the outreach part. Do you think, how has that changed in the era of AI? Is it more channels, less channels? Is it like, in what way? I'll let you kind of run with it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think the easiest way is that, well, the most obvious way is the volume of competition, supply, outbound messages from everyone. Because AI has made it incredibly accessible to just send any message from anywhere at any time, or create any content from anywhere, anytime. It means there's a lot of noise, right? And so how do you define a signal from the noise? Signal is essentially how do you craft, let's say cold email. How do you craft a piece of copy that allows you to kind of cut through all of the AI slop and all this kind of stuff? And so the way that we think about that is really boiling down to cold email principles, right? These are timeless principles that no amount of tactical, no amount of, let's call it AI, would be able to come up with, because it's understanding, okay, what actually makes a compelling message to anyone? Compelling message to anyone is one that is relevant, is one that is brief and clear, that you can literally read in like 2 seconds and understand what they're trying to say. It's something that is compelling enough to take a next action and actually have a short CTA that doesn't require a lot of time or commitment from the person you're targeting. So these are principles, right? They're very high level, broad principles, but you can imagine how you can apply that tactically now. It doesn't matter if we're in AI, whatever industry we're in, understanding that anyone who reads any message does not have a time of day or does not even want to spend 5 minutes reading a message, then you know, okay, you need to draft very, very short messages and get to the point very, very quickly. And so that's when you start to reverse engineer what actually makes a good message. And this doesn't just apply for cold email or LinkedIn outbound, by the way. This applies heavily to content as well. So this is how we think about it. And that, I think, will always be valuable. I think anyone who accesses or uses email or uses LinkedIn, as long as there's people who use it, then it will always be a valuable channel. The game has just gotten a lot harder, right? And now you have to essentially touch base with multiple people and multiple channels, multiple times. That's what we've seen. So it's not just cold email. It's maybe LinkedIn outreach, maybe cold calling on top of that, or maybe LinkedIn content on top of that, whatever it is. Now it's like trying to create ecosystem to allow whoever it is you're targeting for you to just create mind share of that. The way the analogy I like to use is like, let's say, for example, I want to get your attention and you're in your house. I can knock on your door to see if you're in. You may not answer that. Let's say I send a letter through the post through the post box. You may or may not open that either. You may not see that. Let's say I start throwing a party outside of your house. You may or may not know or see that. Let's say I send a carrier pigeon to your house. That may be the thing that for some reason gets you to answer. And so that's how we think about it. The key positioning though is that it cannot be salesy. It has to be value driven. And by value driven, we mean what is something that you can provide to the person you're targeting that is relevant and actually useful to them, that doesn't come at a cost, or is as low friction and easy to say yes to as humanly possible. These are the types of things we think about, and that requires a lot of thinking to actually understand what that even is.
So that's the part I've got two questions here. That's the part that's interesting. So if, okay, you do value-based outbound instead of requesting something, how do you do that? Is that a lead magnet, or give me some examples of,
Yeah,
say,
so
value-driven outbound.
It could be a lead magnet, right? So the principles I've just mentioned, the examples are things like a demo for a SaaS product, or a strategic roadmap if you're a high value whatever services company, or it could be, I don't know, free ad spend, or like a, let's say 15-30K ad spend on a launch or a campaign or whatever it is. That is what we call something compelling and value, because at that point, how, like, you want to basically make something a complete no-brainer, right? And a complete no-brainer is just something that's like impossible to say no to, or like you'd be stupid to say no to. That's when you know you've got a killer offer. And this is actually what Hormozi teaches as well. It's actually something where I think Hormozi's principles on a kind of $100 million offer or a no-brainer offer is incredibly valuable here, to really understand. It's one, understanding the psychology of the person you're talking to, but also understanding what you can provide and how you can communicate it such that it's actually useful and valuable and actually easy to say no to. Easy to say yes to.
Interesting. And so let's use that example on our made up email marketing agency, right? So what for our invented a marketing agency, what's an example of a outbound you would use
for an email marketing agency? So it would be something like, hey, Brian, saw that you did this, this, and this, saw that your whatever email copy, saw that your recent email didn't include this, this, and this. You're probably missing out this much opportunity here. Can I offer you 5 free emails that would generate you XYZ result in XYZ timeline? We've done this for very similar company, similar industry, and generated XYZ result. Interested? Something like that.
Interesting.
Gives you every kind of piece you need. Again, that's a very basic example. And you just spin that to whatever industry and whatever offer you want to target.
And so, like, reason I ask is, so like, I've heard people say, so you said, can I offer you 5 free emails, let's say, right? I've heard people say, hey, offer that, have them reply, and then you do it. Or in this case, because it's so cheap with AI to do it for you already, it's like see included, see attached, click this link for your emails already custom made for you. I'm sure there's a deliverability issue with the second one. And so, like, is there a best practice between the two, or a sneaky way you've gotten around the deliverability issue?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is don't send links. Don't send links, don't send attachments on the first email. But I think the first email has to be compelling enough, or the first outbound message or whatever it is on LinkedIn or whatever, has to be compelling enough for people to say, yes, I'd like to see that. And then you send it, right? And so that to us has been way easier to protect, obviously, deliverability as well as everything else around that. And also maximize results, let's call it responses. Now, the key thing there is to make sure that whatever you provide can connect to the sales cycle, right? So that's another challenge that we need to think about. It's like, what is it that you can provide that connects directly to the sales cycle, that directly signifies buyer's intent? Because if you just send, I don't know, if you send a free book that you just wrote about XYZ, well, how do you know that person's interested? Okay, how do you know that person's interested in buying your service? And why would someone even say yes to a random PDF? Again, everyone else, you got to imagine everyone else is probably sending free PDFs to whatever random ChatGPT generated resource that they created, right?
And tell me about that. So you said connect to the sales cycle. So give me an example of a lead magnet that doesn't connect well to the sales cycle versus one that does. So like you said, strategic roadmap.
Yeah. So Yeah, so I mean, strategic roadmap is a simple one. Again, I'm not sure how high converting it is. I think typically you want to try before you buy one, where you can actually test the service out or whatever it is. Those are probably the highest converting ones, and I think SaaS industry has the best version of this because they can just do it without incurring crazy marginal costs on top of that. That would be the best one. And if let's say you use strategic roadmap and it works, well, that connects to the sales cycle because they can implement it themselves, but again, they're not going to have the nuanced understanding of how to implement it. All that there is just an instruction manual, but there's a lot of nuances within that instruction manual to actually get the outcome. There'll be a lot of things that may go right, go wrong. And so it's like Hormozi says, you give them the information, they pay for an implementation. I think that's very true because there's a lot more than just the information that you get, right? The highest agency people will always be able to figure it out. I'm pretty certain on that. However, it would take a lot of time and effort to do that. Now, a lot of the times, the people we're targeting, probably founders, busy CEOs, whatever it is, they're not going to have time to do anything apart from just scale the business and think about how to scale the business. And so with that being said, if it's compelling enough, they'll send it to the team or whatever it is, and then they'll jump on a call to see what a proposal is, get more kind of technical understanding. And then if they don't have the resources, the bandwidth, then boom, connects to the sales cycle. You can see how you can implement it. Draft out a scope, draft out a proposal, etc.
Got it. So it's got to be directly tied to the pain.
Exactly. So that's the hardest thing. An example of a lead magnet, let's call it, of an offer that isn't tied to the sales cycle is like a book you wrote in a general topic area, right? So let's say, for example, we use this email marketing agency. Let's say, I don't know, the macroeconomic climate of marketing in general, whatever. Like, there's examples which are a bit too broad, don't really make sense, don't really tie to any pain point, don't really add any value, quite easy to create. And so there's things that we need to just figure out. Okay, what is the thing that can hit the pain point the fastest in the shortest amount of words, and how can we deliver that? Again, I say this as it's very easy. It's actually very, very difficult. You have to do a bunch of tests to actually figure out what people are receptive to. We've ran campaigns which were like, this is literally a no-brainer. I've got like no responses off the back of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is something where it feels easy. Like you look at it and you're like, yeah, of course, I just make a little pamphlet or a book or something that like ties to the thing I'm selling. You're like, duh. But like, I'm sure you've seen with your clients that it takes iterations and months and months and months, right, before like you find the right combination of pain plus your little lead magnet solution that connects to the sale.
I'll give you a good example. We recently took on a client who had this crazy, we thought it was a crazy offer where he'd like offer them whatever ad spend or whatever it is to essentially test the product that he had. And we thought that was a no-brainer because like, why would you not accept free money? And it just didn't work. It didn't work to the way we wanted to. And we tested like 5 other campaigns, different style, different angles. And the only reason why it didn't work is because if you say you offer people free money, it does come off as a bit scammy, so you don't understand whether it's legit or not, especially as a cold email, right? You don't know where the trust is. And so that's probably one of the reasons. But that was an example of a hypothesis that we thought was correct, but ended up not being correct. But the next step is actually what learnings do we have from that, and how can we actually apply that to the next 5 iterations that we're doing? So we've run, I think, 4 or 5 different campaigns, and now we've iterated 2, 3, 4 times to get 5 more campaigns. And one of them's actually hit pretty well, and it's something which, again, it's still kind of in the process of being run or executed, but it's something where the way we think about scaling and campaigns is what works for one client, we can translate to another client. I think that's the general principle that we think about. And now we have AI. I can now very easily see what is working for each client, and we can actually run broad playbooks. That's very cool. This is the craziest thing, right? And we all store it in an intelligence unit or intelligence system that can remember which campaigns are running where, and what the results of those campaigns were, and which industries those campaigns were run in, so that we can apply that to every single customer. So the way we segment our, let's call it ideal customer profile, whatever, is very much understanding what playbooks can we run for them, because the playbooks then allow us to hit the result in very, very high accuracy.
Yeah. And I imagine there's a huge benefit to working with you in the sense that you can see across everyone what's working, what's not. Um, and because like, I mean, so we have the same thing where if you're whatever, I have a recruiting agency and you're like, hey, I want to hire an email marketer. Well, we can see what email marketers look like across all of Latin America and choose the city that like you get the best quality, which is hard to do if you're doing it on your own. And so I imagine for you, it's probably you have all this data across all the different offers that are working and the different channels. I imagine the combination of offer and channel is a tough, like testing nut to crack.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the beauty of all of this is the underlying idea that you now have visibility of everything, right? You have a visibility of every single channel, every single performance metric.
Yeah,
You don't have to
it's
rely
cool.
on a tool to do that, and we can unify all of that. So, for example, our LinkedIn and our cold email outreach, we have a unified dashboard now. We can just see, okay, in one place, what is going on at each stage, where the bottlenecks are, and everything like that, and it saves the data. It's like a video game where you just play the game, you go to a certain point, and you save the data into the memory or whatever. And now it becomes, yes, it becomes harder, more complicated, and everything like that. But I also think if you know how to use the tools, you can move way faster and choose and understand what to do way faster than you could have done before. And then that allows you to create these compounding effects. Because let's say, for example, you're testing, but you don't know what's going on where, you might have some data missing, you might not have clean data either, or you might not even know how to interpret the data. That's when it starts slowing everyone down, because without clean data, contextualized and visualized, then no one knows really what to do. And then when no one knows what to do, then it's going to be very hard to get to any result, right? If you're not backing everything up with data, like we can now say confidently, hey, if we run this play, it will work. If we run this play, it probably won't work because of X, Y, Z reasons. The more we do this, the more iterations and reps we get, the more compounded knowledge we have now. It's a
That is
compounding
crazy.
intelligence
That is
system, right?
crazy.
So the portfolio of clients we have now, okay, cool. And we're going to continue working with them for hopefully as long as possible. Every new client that comes on now will benefit from the compounding knowledge and IP that we're
That is
developing over
crazy.
time.
Yeah.
And this is something that you can't find publicly because we're actually retrieving primary information or primary data in real time, right? And we're saving it to our internal systems. So this is actually like I think that is ultimately one core moat of our business. And I think for any business owner, I think this is a core moat for any business.
100% agreed. I mean, like, I think especially in the era of AI where everyone's giving out their skills, right? Their Claude skills. And so, like, just like you're in the Matrix, like, I can download your skills, but I can't download your data. And I think data is the biggest advantage folks have is data experience compounding. And I can nerd out about this forever. I think the last question I want to ask is around the channels. So you said, hey, earlier you said, in the AI era, when you're reaching out to these folks, you can knock on the door, you can go through the window. You go through the window, you know what I mean? Not that creepy, right? Okay, so imagine, I've got my email marketing agency. I'm trying to figure out what channels to use, or like we've gotten to this. We've used channels for a little bit, but each channel takes 6 months, 12 months to crack, etc. Is it faster in this area? Should I try to be using more channels, or is that just a benefit of working with folks like you who can get me up to speed in those channels really quickly? Like, should I be doing, like, where's the balance of sorry, let me ask the question a way. If I've cracked the offer where it's like, okay, I know I'm targeting a specific person with this pain in this way, is it safe to just keep testing a ton of different channels to hit that offer? Or should I just be totally focused on one channel and trying to drive as much as I possibly can through that channel?
Yeah. I've referenced Hormozi so many times in this podcast, but I'm going to reference him again one more because I think it's relevant. He talks about how 0 to 1 million is all about one channel, 0 to 100 is one channel, one avatar, one offer. 100 to 1 million, okay, or 100K to a million is one channel, one avatar, one product to offer reliably. and then 1 to 10 million is when you potentially experiment with one more channel, let's say. And I think that loosely, again, it doesn't apply for every single customer prospect, and everyone can be different or offer. But I think that loosely is a good understanding and idea. Like we originally, for example, we originally scaled our business. That 100K to 350K, by the way, that was all scaled with viral X threads, right? That was literally one channel, like one piece of content with a CTA at the end to book a meeting with us. That's how we got all of our clients. Obviously that didn't work the whole time. So we needed to have multiple channels now to actually make it more predictable and more reliable. But I do think that if you haven't cracked one channel, I think cracking one channel, you'd be surprised how much business you can generate if you crack one channel. That's how I think about it. And you do it hard, you put volume. I think a lot of times people don't think about how much volume they're doing. So if you're sending 1,000 emails a month, there are people in your space or competitors in your space probably sending 100,000 emails a month, and you don't even know about that, right? And so that's the difference between how fast you can scale. But again, this very much depends on how you want to scale and how big a ticket size is, and a lot of other components that we haven't even talked about, right? So for example, another type of business might be high value, high relationship based business where you go to conferences. And so again, how can we leverage AI or whatever it is to actually support people there as well, right? By understanding, hey, who's going, how can we connect with them, like all these types of things. That is how I think about it.
Yeah, gotcha. That's super helpful. Well, cool, man. I think this is super interesting. I mean, like, I feel like a lot of people, this is a problem a lot of people are wrestling with. And I think you're able to make it very tactical, which is awesome. And so where can folks reach you?
Awesome. Yeah. So our company is RevenueFlow.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Fernando Cao, so CAO. On Twitter or X, at the Fernando CZ. That's pretty much all of my socials that I use for now. And we actually just started a YouTube channel, actually, RevenueFlow. So check that out.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, Fernando. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Brian.